What many are calling as the definitive comic-accurate Batman has released from McFarlane Toys, and after some struggles and annoyances with Amazon, that's partly my mistake, it's finally here for me to cover in a review. And I feel the need to put a disclosure here at the very top. The design for the Batsuit in Knightfall, despite being one of the quintessential story arcs for any Batman comic arc out there, as far as the breaking of the Bat and Bane's inclusion and how influential it was on the comic books of Batman and superhero genre in general. The suit design itself, I'm not overly fond of. I don't know if it's maybe the light gray, the look of the blue, I don't know. It's something about the design itself that I don't really gravitate towards. If there was anything that came remotely close to this, I would say maybe the 1975 version of this character, or if we were to fast forward a little bit, Batman Hush, or any kind of Jim Lee inspired kind of take on the suit itself, as far as something that looks very dynamic and cool while still retaining a little bit of that blue. I would probably gravitate more towards the Jim Lee, because this look I feel is a little bit too poppy, a little too just out there, that it kind of resembles more so of the Adam West, and that's just a little bit before my time, as Joel would say. But with all those things kind of out of the way, yeah, I'm definitely starting to see why a lot of people are already considering this to be figure of the year, despite some discrepancies. First of all, holy shit, no plastic ties. Well, save for the one at the very bottom with the ankle. I guess they couldn't go a full, the full Monty as far as abstaining from using the plastic ties that I absolutely hate in the McFarlane Toys packaging. But it's a definitive step in the right direction to know that there was only one that I had to cut through with the ankle, and everything else. At first I thought it was maybe a manufacturing error, but then I noticed that the plastic that was holding the figure in place had no holes except for the one for the tie on the ankle. Outside of that, no plastic ties. Please, McFarlane, keep it up. That, and maybe widen the little slit that held the cape in place, because the cape is still stuck behind the plastic that needs to be pulled through. And unfortunately, through my finagling, despite trying to be very, very careful, it already managed to make a little bit of an indentation there on the left side of the cape that you can visibly see right about right there. So that's a bummer, but at least it looks like everything is looking a little higher up as far as the way that everything is enclosed, and it's a bit more user-friendly. So that was already a light at the end of the tunnel for me and Knightfall Batman. The other would have to be that even though I have my own personal reservations as far as the actual design work of the actual artistry of this suit itself, man, this is actually a pretty high caliber figure as far as musculature and plastic quality, because right off the bat, I took a really strong gaze and observation of the figure, scanned it from head to toe, and frankly, I don't really feel like anything stands out in a negative light as far as proportions, as far as anything looking a little aloof, overly large, overly small. Everything looks like it's in place fairly well. Even if maybe you want to look a little closer and maybe take a look at some of the leg pieces or the arm pieces and be like, well, that looks kind of like the Hush Batman mold, or that looks like this. But the torso definitely looks a little bit different, especially with the way that you can see an awful lot of great sculpt work happening with the cloth material to kind of give it that kind of creasing look on the sides of the pecs, the abdomen, and then most notably right here around the crotch area. It pretty much mimics that of, I'm about to get super artsy and possibly really pretentious, but this reminds me an awful lot of those sculpture works that you see in the Renaissance era, like Michelangelo or whatever, where so many, art aficionados look at them and go, oh my god, they were able to create the illusion of cloth in the marble. I gotta be honest, I'm actually pretty impressed by the way that they were able to replicate that cloth feeling on the surface with some of the work happening here on the limbs and the torso and the thighs. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised with the work on that, and you could almost argue that the same thing goes for any of the blue parts, especially the gauntlets, the boots. You can still see a great texture work happening there, but it all feels robust, none of it feels pretty cheap, and even though I'm not a huge fan of this style of utility belt with the yellow, and it just feels like it's kind of just wrapping itself around. A little bit of extra detail would have been nice, even though this is, again, technically comic accurate. Oh my lord, do I actually really do love that bat symbol there on the chest. It's embossed, you can actually feel the texture work of the black symbol there, and none of it feels painted whatsoever. You can actually feel the symbol that was sculpted and encased on top of the surface of the chest. So that is, like I said, it's the little things like this that any other toy company probably would have looked at that and said, just paint it on, or have it be like an adhesive that needs to be pressed on via heat. But no, this is an actual plastic piece that was embossed into the chest itself, so it sells on the illusion, it sells on the quality. I would just really, really wish that the same could be said about the head sculpt, because even though the paintwork and the actual design of the lips strikes very visibly well as far as how he looked like in the comics, and even though I would have liked some longer ears to have it be faithful to the Knightfall story arc, the overall shade of blue and the way that the frown is then put upon the front of the face there via the sculpt is good. There's just something kind of off about the jowl. I don't know if it's just me, maybe I got a defect, maybe I got something kind of wonky with mine. Please let me know in the comments if you guys own any of your Knightfall Batman. Is it just me, or does it look like he went into the dentist and got one of his wisdom teeth on the right side taken out versus that of the left? Because he's looking a little inflamed on the bottom side of the right jaw. And I don't know why that is happening. I tried my best to think to myself, is it like an optical illusion? Is it just in my head? But no, every time I rotate the head and I look at it from left to right, it seems like I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. They made this just a little bigger than that of the left side. The left side looks like he's got a stronger little cut of the jib, so to speak. Not so much happening with the right. So if you look at him isolated, like if you just look at the right side, you'll be like, oh, all right, cool. That looks like a pretty strong head sculpt. You look at the left by itself, looks about the same. Still looks pretty, impressive and pretty well in line. Once you look at it from the front, though, that's where I look at the jaw line right there, and something just looks completely asymmetric and screwed up. And I'm a little bummed that whether this was an isolated incident or a widespread issue, this happened to plague something that was very thoroughly impressing me. Because prior to me even noticing that, my main complaint, or nitpick rather, would have been the cape, even though it's not sculpted very badly, and it still retains the same shade of blue, and minus my little scuff right here on the left side because of the packaging, that could be attributed to user error, the way that I was taking them out. But it's just the little bit of flimsiness, the quality could have been just a little bit on the thicker side, but again, it was completely overshadowed by the slight QC issue that I'm noticing here with, again, the jawline. There's just something really off about that it bothers me even more so, to the point where maybe as he becomes more readily available, I might have to pick up a secondhand one just to see and compare. Or if I should come across them in the store, take a very strong look at that jaw and see if it has the exact same problem. And if not, maybe he'll come home with me. Pause. Well, not pause. He's Batman. And the next idea that I had was to maybe rely on the articulation or the movement of the head to try to disguise the problem that was happening with the jaw. It kind of sort of works, because once we get to the actual movement of the figure, it's pretty standard for that of McFarlane Toys. You have the joint here at the head that is able to rotate the full 360 and feels pretty good in hand. And he's able to tilt up slightly like so, but that just kind of draws a little bit more attention to that jaw mishap. Kind of inclining the head down. He doesn't really do too much of it, but it kind of hides it a little bit better, especially if you do start to tilt the head from left to right. You'll notice that you can kind of bury the jaw somewhat into his neck, or into his neck muscles, so to speak, so that way you're able to at least create an illusion like it's not there, especially if you're going into toy photography and you put it at an angle like so. Maybe, just maybe, it'll look a little bit friendlier and less intrusive due to the way that my jaw was structured. So again, that could be an isolated incident, and I'm relying on some of the comments to let me know if you guys do happen to have the Knightfall Batman here. Does he look, whether it be the original standard version or rather that cool looking San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, please let me know if this came with yours as well. But once we get past that, we then get to my next favorite thing about what was the unlikeliest of Batman to really impress me. And that would be the articulation, because, again, say what you want about the costume, my personal preferences with it, this articulation, despite still hitting the usual 22 points that McFarlane always boasts about, it feels really good. And again, they were able to handle the QC behind the articulation very, very well, because they were able to give it a vertical cut here at the top arms. You're able to fully rotate the arms 360 vertically, and the cape doesn't really get too much in the way, because even though, again, I was saying that it was a little on the flimsy side as far as the quality of the construction, it at least gets out of the way once you get into that rotation movement. Then the extension is actually not too bad on the inside part of that ball joint, that is able to allow the arm to extend to the sides almost at a full 180. And then furthermore, you have some slight butterfly action with the hinge or the ball joint, the rod inside, that allows some slight shrug movement in any kind of direction, as you can see right there. And the washer inside allows it to move much more freely, and it doesn't feel intrusive. It doesn't feel like it gets in the way of itself, and this is actually really nice feeling. Very difficult to describe on camera, but when you get yours in hand, you'll know what I'm talking about. Same thing for the biceps. Don't feel very intrusive, and you can fully rotate 360 in place. Two joints at the elbow that are fully able to bend all the way up. Though mines do get a little stiff once I rotate all the way to the inwards part right about right there and start to break away the illusion slightly right here on the elbow. But once you get past that, the articulation is actually very free-flowing and also ratcheted in place, so really lends to the posability and the awesome lookingness of the figure itself, or at least the arm areas. And then once we get to the wrists, we get to something that's both good and bad, because you got the joints that I really love, where they're split down the middle, they're flush better with the forearms, so they look much more natural to the body, and still allow the wrist to be able to rotate 360 degrees in place, as well as pivot inwards and outwards via that hinge. But the only thing that to me looked just a little weird out of the packaging was that, I don't know if it's just me, but they look like they were constructed just a little longer than your typical wrist joints. Again, it might just be me. Maybe I'm just overly thinking it, because now this jaw piece, or the mishap that's happening here as far as the sculpting, got in my head, and now I'm looking at the wrists like, are those too long? Did I get a reject? What's happening? Anyways, once you move past that though, and you start to futz with the wrists a little bit better, then you'll notice that maybe they look a little bit much more natural. It's just a matter of how they're positioned. Maybe they were positioned just a little aloof right out of the box. So once you get them situated in an intimidating way, where he looks like he's all clenched up like this and ready to do battle, they definitely look a lot more natural. Like right there, the wrists don't look as bad, so it was probably just something in my head. The articulation continues to do wonders with the mid-torso cut that is able to rotate almost a full 360. Feels a little tight once I get to the back over here, but it looks like it's able to give you the full motion. Not so much in the way of crunching, it kind of stops right about right there, but like all other McFarlane toys in the past, they are able to extend almost all the way towards the back like so, revealing the six-pack beefcake abs right there. And the waist joint, even though it's not able to crunch much more forwards towards the front like that, it is still able to nudge a little better than the mid-torso cut, and then extension towards the back allows it even further, so you can pretty much get up to that point right about right there. That way you're able to properly replicate that famous Knightfall panel. Yes, I went there. And before I forget, the waist joint is actually able to rotate in and of itself as well, though it does do a little something weird to the rubberized part of the crotch piece and the diaper here, so do be careful. But speaking of that diaper, it's able to flush with the rest of the legs right there, much more naturally than some other McFarlanes. So going back to what I mentioned before about proportions, they all look very natural, that I was pleasantly surprised that nothing looked too out of place. And furthermore, the crotch piece does not restrict any kind of mobility on the top leg joints. You're still able to rotate towards the front about that far, right about right there. And then you're able to extend towards the back about that far, pretty standard for our McFarlane toys. And then extension towards the sides, it's almost an even 180, so he's pretty flexible in that department. Knee joints, once again, are able to move all the way up via the ratcheted two joints that you got right about right there, though they do stop a little earlier than some other McFarlanes, but that's only because of the back muscle. He definitely does not skip leg day. And then once again, you have those ankle joints similar to that of the wrist that I really like, that are flush better to the boot and are allowing still the foot to rotate 360 degrees at the top of the joint, and being able to bend the ankle downwards about there and then move it upwards about that far. They're ratcheted, they feel great in place, they don't feel loose, they feel pretty stable to give them some pretty good footing. You can even kind of incline them inwards about that much into that angle, into that direction, right about right there, and even towards the outside. So posability and stability when it comes to certain poses is definitely going to be favored by those joints. And if that wasn't enough, you got the toesies that are more so halfway through the foot, but they do allow the toes to bend almost all the way up. Once again, they feel great in hand, feel pretty stable, not loose at all. So overall, just thoroughly impressed with the articulation here, that even though it's a little bit standard as far as quantity is concerned, it's the quality that really matters, and it looks like they nailed it out of the park. And you can tell that with Knightfall Batman, they decided to go for simplicity instead of overcomplicating things as far as the details on the suit or the construction work of the figure itself and the articulation, similar to that of how he looked like in the comic. You know, it's a very straightforward suit, so they wanted to stay as faithful and accurate to that as possible, while at the same time still delivering on a McFarlane figure that you would expect. Same thing goes for the accessories. They threw in this comic accurate Batarang that a lot of people have argued is actually one of the more screen accurate, or in this case, comic accurate Batarangs. I'm of the mindset that it really depends. It's kind of a case-by-case basis, because here it perfectly fits. I would have preferred the wingspan of the tips of the Batarangs just to be a little longer. That way they feel a bit more firmer on the extra Batarang holding open hands that he comes with. So it's always good to see a McFarlane Toys Batman come with extra hands. That always pleases me. I just wish, as far as preference, subjective preference, that the wingtips here would have been a little longer, a little bit more angled and stylized. But overall, in terms of size and scaling, yes, it's damn near perfect. Because you know who did have huge Batarangs? Dark Knight Trilogy Batman. Those things were just way too huge and very distracting, considering that we know how big they were on screen. And again, it kind of lends to that whole theory that a lot of us have, that when it comes to live action Batman, McFarlane's got something kind of weird going on where he just can't get it right. And if I can present just one other slight little nitpick, is that these hands, the Batarang holding hands, despite being very easy to swap out for the fisted hands, so it's actually a pretty seamless process you can do right here amongst the wrist joint, pops into place very nicely. There's something about, and again, this could also be similarly another isolated incident similar to the asymmetric jawline he's got going on, but I feel like they drilled the holes. Yes, I'm now nitpicking the actual construction of the holes for the pegs. Inside of these Batarang holding hands, they drilled the holes just a little askew to where whenever I swap the hands and I have these hands in place, they look a little off. They look like they're not flush with the rest of that wrist joint the way that the fisted hands were. Again, could be an optical illusion that might just be in my head, but something just looks a little off about the way they're placed. Let me know in the comments. Going off of the little B-roll that you see right here, do they look a little off? Do you think that maybe they missed the central mark when it came to drilling inside of that machine, and it went off like a millimeter off to the side in any direction? So in order to fix that, I've learned to maybe rotate the wrist joint in the opposite direction to make it look a little bit more flush. But overall, it still looks about the same, so I don't know. Again, it could just be something in my head, but it just looks like this part right here is angled in this direction more so, and that's not the way that the wrist joint is supposed to be bending. And the result is no real way to fix that. It just feels like the wrist is always like this when I have any of these hands placed there. But once you look past that, you can then fit the Batarang inside and pose them with it. So overall, despite, again, like I said before, the discrepancies of those things that could or could not be isolated incidents, whether it be the jowl, those wrist holes for the Batarang holding hands, and then all the little caveats that typically plague McFarlane figures, such as the way that the cape got scuffed or the quality of said cape. Yeah, it's very, very, very easy, no doubt about it, as to why some people consider this to now be their most definitive comic-accurate Batman, and I'm pleasantly surprised considering that I personally don't really gravitate towards this style of suit. I almost never wear it when it was showing up on Batman Arkham Knight as DLC for those skins that you're able to customize, but as a McFarlane Toys figure, holy shit, I am genuinely impressed with what I'm working here. It's not the most definitive that I would like to showcase in my collection, as far as like, yeah, this is the one that I would run out from the burning building to make sure that it's secure. And I'm not sure if he's like the most perfect and definitive Batman that McFarlane has released to date, but he's pretty damn close. Close enough for me to go ahead and give him an 8 out of 10. definitely pick him up if you're going for a complete Batman collection, or even if you're not. This is still a worthwhile McFarlane that showcases exactly where if you keep things simple at a good price point of a simple 20 bucks and prioritizing the things that really make a figure stand out as far as posability, articulation, and the quality of plastic, you can make someone like myself who typically doesn't like the suit or the visual aesthetics of a certain character look past that and still be down with the figure. There are going to be affiliate links in the description if you guys want to pick up your own in the process and help out the channel. Though I must warn you, because of how definitive he is for so many people, possibly even myself, even though, like I said, I'm still kind of in the thinking phase, still contemplating it, but don't be surprised if he does in fact end up in my top 5 by the end of the year. He is so high in demand that he is very likely still sold out through those affiliate links, but it's always worth a try checking them out and seeing if he's back in stock. Turn on any kind of notification or alert, that way you guys get notified as soon as they do become available and you guys can bring yours home as well. Otherwise, for those of you who do own the McFarlane Toys Knightfall Batman, what do you guys think of it so far? Is it your true definitive comic accurate Batman that you go to as far as that one to be displayed up on your shelf? Which one has it replaced? I know some people have made the comparison between this and DC 1000 as far as that comic accurate looking Batman that was definitive and standalone in their collection, and now this one's pretty much taking up that space on the shelf. Where does this rank as far as your top 5 McFarlane Toy Batman figures of the year so far? And if you haven't picked it up, will you be getting it once you come across it in store or online? Let me know in the comments where you guys' insights. As always, if you guys liked the video, thumbs up, thumbs down if you didn't, and subscribe for more McFarlane Toys figure reviews as they kind of come down here with 2023. And as always, guys, stay humble. I'll see you later.